All right, guys, so for this lesson, we're going to be looking at how you do a self-assessment of your narrative writing piece. We've been working on your narrative for quite a while. We started with a 6-word memoir just to find a topic, to find something to write about. And then we expanded that to a 144-word tweet so that you could start building your narrative, start building a little bit of the story, but not completing it. After you had your 144-word tweet done, then we talked about adding an effective lead, whether it be setting the mood, asking a question, using dialogue or a quote, an astonishing fact, arresting statement, or introducing the character. So when you have a really good lead that you're happy with and you need to connect it to your 144-word tweet, sometimes they don't fit. Sometimes they're awkward and they aren't really related topics. So that's when you need to figure out how to write a transition. A transition is either a word or a sentence or a group of sentences that will allow one idea to flow smoothly from one sentence to the next. So once you have your lead and possibly a transition or transitions, and then you're into the body of your writing, then what I'm going to be looking for and what you need to be looking for is your writing style. So are you using active verbs? Are you eliminating verbs like went, goes, is, was, were, and substituting them with more active verbs like drove, sat, jumped, flew, actually telling us specifically what the characters are doing. I also want you to be looking for really good use of adjectives, descriptive words that are very clear, using a few adverbs. So for example, instead of saying the sunset was very pretty, well, instead of saying very pretty, it was beautiful, it was awesome, it was stunning. So we're going to be looking for that. So you really want to be looking at your writing style. Are you using really clear, vivid imagery, using your active verbs and your adjectives? And then lastly, as we look at your writing, we want to make sure that you're using the basic rules of grammar, subject, verb agreement. For example, I am speaking with you. My story is nearly finished. I will need to revise it some more. Any word that you have in your narrative, you should spell it correctly, because if it's a word you chose to use, it should be a word that you've spelled correctly. I'm looking for end punctuation, a period, exclamation point, or a question mark at the end of every sentence. I'm also looking for capitalization, where you capitalize the first word of every single sentence, capitalize people's names, the names of places, any proper nouns. And if you're brave and you want to try and use commas, try to use them to the best of your ability. So I'm not grading everything that's on the narrative writing rubric, which was in one of your lessons in Google Classroom. I'm only grading those things that we have spoken about. So what we're going to do next is we're going to just look at the checklist real quickly. I'm going to add my writing piece again, and then I'm just going to pick it apart using the checklist to show you what it takes to analyze and assess your own writing. So this is the narrative writing checklist, and it is based specifically from the full narrative writing rubric. I'm not grading everything on the rubric because we haven't practiced everything on the rubric. So you'll notice I have 6 different major bullets with some bullets set within. So the first big thing that I'm going to be looking for in your writing is, did you establish an effective lead? And you'll see there are 6 types of leads. So what you would want to do is check off the type of lead that you felt that you used. Secondly, have you introduced the setting? And setting includes time and place. Narrator, who's telling this narrative? If you are the narrator, then you need to be consistent with saying I said, I did, using the correct pronoun, and making sure that you let me know in your writing who all the people, who are all the characters, animals, whatever, that are part of your story. As you're telling your story, I want you to make sure that the sequence of events that you are telling unfolds naturally, which means they are in a logical order. Things that happen first, second, third, fourth, next, later, after. And those are also transition words. So the transition words I just mentioned, words like first, next, later, or they are complete sentences that are used to connect 2 different ideas and help it flow. Next, we have effective word choice. Again, those active verbs. Instead of saying the dog was on the couch, the dog jumped on the couch, the dog slept on the couch, the dog snoozed on the couch. And then clear, very descriptive adjectives. Instead of saying very pretty, say it was beautiful, it was stunning, it was lovely. And then your last bullet is for your grammar and mechanics. So when I say subject verb agreement, I was. You were, not you was, because you know what that does to me, it makes me crazy. The dogs were fighting. The dog was barking. Making sure that you use end punctuation at the end of every sentence and you used your commas correctly. Any word that is in your narrative needs to be spelled correctly. If it's not, you'll see a red line, and the red line under it usually means it's misspelled or that it doesn't recognize it. And if spell check doesn't recognize your word, check it to be on the safe side. Then lastly, you want to make sure that you have correct capitalization, which includes the first word in every single sentence. Also, the first word in pieces of dialogue if you've chosen to have your characters speak. Any proper noun, which includes people's names, the names of places, the specific names of things like brand names, those all need to be capitalized. So when I score your writing piece, you should already have a pretty good idea of how well you did if you use this checklist. If you check all 6 major categories, then you have at least a 3 or meets the standard for writing on this piece. So I'm going to take a look at my writing piece, and then you'll see how someone who is analyzing and reflecting on their own writing would use this checklist. So here is my final draft of my narrative about my summer camp in Lake Hebron, and it's set up in MLA format, which I want to talk about before we do the checklist. So a couple of things you're going to need to notice or pay attention to is first that everything is double spaced, so you're going to need to choose the double space function, whether you're in Pages or in Google Docs. Another thing that's important is that this is required in MLA format, that you use a 12-point font. Even though my eyes are old and tired, you still need to use 12-point font. And the correct font that is really mandatory, especially when you get into the high school, so we're going to start here in 7th and 8th grade, you're going to use Times New Roman. No matter how fancy you want your piece to look, when you hand in a final draft, it must be in Times New Roman font, 12-point, and everything needs to be double spaced. So the other part of MLA format is right here where you have your heading. So the first line, you'll notice it starts on the margin on the left-hand side. It has your name, in this case it's my name, followed by the name of your teacher, which would be Mrs. Rich. And then the third line is grade 7 or 8 ELA. Fourth line is the date that you're handing it in. And the fifth line is the name of your project. So I have in my MLA format, Robin Rich, Mrs. Rich, grade 7, 8 ELA. I'm handing this in on Friday, so the date is November 20th, 2020. Please don't do 11/20/20. We actually write out the month. And the name of this assignment is personal narrative. So that's my MLA format. And you'll notice the rest of my document is in Times New Roman, and it is double spaced. And double spacing makes it easier to read and also gives the teacher an opportunity to give you feedback. So the first thing that I'm going to be looking for in my checklist is, do I have an effective lead? So when I look at the first line or two of my narrative, let's find out if there is an effective lead. The song of loons echoes across Lake Hebron, filling the night with a peaceful symphony. Well, even though I wrote it myself, I wrote it on purpose to be setting the mood. And I continued not only to set the mood, but also to build a transition. So the next two sentences are a transition between the lead and my actual body. So the song of loons echoes across Lake Hebron, filling the night with a peaceful symphony. On many calm summer nights, I sit on the deck of my camp listening and relaxing. This special spot renews my spirit after a long, hard year. So that's the introduction. I do have a lead. I would call that setting the mood. The the red lines, that's my transition. So what about the loons? Well, I listen to them while I'm sitting on my deck. And then what deck? The deck at my camp. So I've tried to make sure that my lead connects to the body of my writing with a transition. So I feel like I have an effective lead. I did use some transition sentences to connect to the body of my camp. Excuse me. The next thing that I'm going to be looking for is, did I introduce the setting, the narrator, and the characters? So my setting, we have my family's camp. It's at the end of the road, north shore of Lake Hebron, and it's in Monson. I also said that we built it 10 years ago, so that's giving you a sense of time and definitely giving me a sense of place. When we discussed this piece in my remote group today, one of the students asked, can I add more information and can I describe it more? So describe camp. And that's something I haven't done. So in my revision, I probably will add another sentence or two describing the camp, because I'm talking about it, but I haven't really given you that visual of what it looks like. So the next thing in my narrative process, I decided I would try to use some dialogue. Dialogue is helpful because it brings alive who is in your piece. So in this case, it's my sister Pam, and I'm the narrator, so I'm the storyteller. So I did use dialogue as a way to bring my story along. The other thing we're looking for is, did I use any kind of active verbs or adjectives? So here we have sparkling water. We have, I used the verb exclaimed instead of said. Sitting, watching, those are active verbs. In the next paragraph, when you go out the front door and walk off the deck, I mean, I don't know how else you could say go, but I'm walking. You're just a few feet away from Lake Hebron. Some adjectives: crystal clear, perfect spot. Here's my verbs: swimming, kayaking, and fishing. We are the only people on the lake. The next section, when I talk about hiking, if you go out the back door, you're just steps away from the Appalachian Trail. So again, that gives a sense of setting in the total wilderness. The trail actually ends in our driveway, so I can truthfully say I hike. I don't say I go on the Appalachian Trail every day. I hike the Appalachian Trail. Again, I have dialogue, so I'm introducing my dogs. Their names are Dazzy and Nori. And I talk about how they like to hike with me. And instead of the dogs are excited, I say they dance with excitement. They are looking forward to meeting hikers. We meet hikers on the trail. Last summer, a woman from Georgia actually volunteered to carry Nori down the trail. So I'm trying really hard in my writing to think about what specifically happened. What active verbs can I use to show exactly what's happening and what people are doing? So here again, I have more dialogue, and you'll notice as far as my capitalization, the first word in dialogue is capitalized. There's a comma here because this is who said it. The sentence is not finished. So when I look at my spelling, punctuation, and capitalization, I don't have any words with red lines under them. So that means either the words are spelled correctly or I misspelled it and maybe it's a homophone. I check carefully to make sure I have end punctuation and that when I use commas, I use them correctly. So capitalization is important. So people's names, you'll notice Dazzy and Nori, the names of my dogs, they're capitalized. On the last page, Lake Hebron, Appalachian Trail is the specific name of a specific place. So when I go through my narrative writing checklist, I pretty much can check off all 6 of the categories. So this writing piece is probably a 3. It definitely needs more work as far as telling what the camp looks like, because that left some of my readers wondering. So your task after you watch this video is open up the narrative writing checklist from Google Classroom, open up your narrative writing piece, read it through carefully, almost as if you have never read it before, and then check off any and all of the elements that you feel that you've successfully completed in your narrative. So literally check the boxes. And when you're done analyzing your writing, then what I want you to do is, through Google Classroom, I want you to send me your completed checklist and also send me your final draft of your writing piece. And then I'll read it through, and then I'll add my rubric to show you how well we agree. So this is really how we're going to finish this narrative writing piece, because the next narrative writing piece will be much different for 7th grade and 8th grade. So good luck, and I can't wait to read your finished stories.